This is our farm that my wife and I bought. We actually paid cash for it from diving on the Chathams. A couple of dogs there. That's a marine farm. This is over at Wainui. We've got kelp there. So it just encapsulates quite a bit of what we do. I'm trying to muster wild sheep from Rogers Rock there. There's no editing in that photo. That's me in my prime at 45 feet. And I got 45 power. I spent 17 years as a power diver. Every time I dived in an area, the next time I went back, there were less power. So coming from a farming background, I got into reseeding in the late 1980s and early 1990s. The reseeding of power wasn't picked up by the rest of the industry as much as I thought. We then got into growing small power for the cocktail size market, and we started to do some pearl culture. When an algal bloom came through and wiped out most of our small fish one year, so we switched our entire power farming operation to pearl culture. We farm them in barrels. You've got to have hospital-like conditions. It takes 3 years to grow them. You've got to feed them every week. It's a hugely labour-intensive business, and there's 20 things to get right. If you get 19 things wrong, you don't make money. We have the bluest of all pearls. We have the greatest range of colour of all pearls. We determined not to sell any pearls until we had a fully branded product for sale. We developed the brand Eyris Pearls, as unique as you, and we wanted to create unique gems of everlasting pleasure by combining the rhythms of nature with the art of blue pearl culture. We had the GIA do a tour of, they did 3 pearl operations. The GIA is the Gemological Institute of America. It's the largest gemological body in the world. In 2008, they did a world tour of Eyris Pearls, Robert Wan in Tahiti and Paspalia in Australia. They were with us for 3 days. At the end of that tour with us, we put out a whole lot of pearls on the table, and there was a lady from Malta came up with a couple of pearls and said, "How much for these?" And I said, "Turn it over and you'll see the price." And she tried to bargain me. I said, "No, that's the price. We don't discount anything." So she went over to another table and picked up Luscious. And someone said, "You can see the whole room in that pearl." And she said, "How much for this one?" I said, "Well, turn it over." And she said, "Would you throw the other 2 in if I buy this one?" And I thought, okay. So we hold the record for a Mabe pearl, which is a half-round pearl, of $20,000. And those people in the room, not a single person batted an eyelid. This is the Queen. John Key, during his time as Prime Minister, we donated 5 lots of pearls to John Key as gifts. And this is Aotearoa's pearl. And John was invited to go to Balmoral with his family. And the deal is, if you get invited to Balmoral, you are expected to take a gift. And it was lovely that it was an Eyris blue pearl. I spent about 18 months culling wild sheep 43 years ago. We now run 3,000 Pilana and Wyld sheep on our 2 farms on Banks Peninsula. We should be very careful what we call a pest, because these sheep have gone from pest to precious in 30 years. Ag Research spent 6 years breeding sheep with short tails and bare bums and easy care. They spent $600,000 on these. David Scobie was the lead scientist on this, and they came up for sale. They were heading to the meatworks, and I bought the whole lot. It actually costs, according to the scientists and to a lot of farming people, $14 a sheep to tail. So we haven't tailed a sheep in 20 years. So these are the things we don't do. We don't tail, we don't drench, we don't dip, we don't vaccinate, we don't trim feet, we don't do lambing beats. We've not had a bearing out. A bearing is a prolapsed uterus. 1% of our entire flock in New Zealand has bearings. It is entirely genetic, not management. We don't do fecal egg counts. I won't explain what they are, it's terrible. With our cattle, we don't need calving, we don't drench them, we don't use pour-on, we don't vaccinate. We operate by a process called negative deselection. We don't know what a good sheep is, but we think we know what a bad one is. Spot the neighbour's sheep. They were shorn at about the same time. We don't get dags. We don't get fly strike before Christmas. If we share our lambs, we virtually don't get any fly strike. Organics is growing across all sectors about 15% per year. The wine industry has a target of 20% by 2020. They're well on target. Kiwi fruit people are ahead of target. Biological consultant said to me when I asked him the question, how many people are biological now? And he said, about 10 or 12%. How many people were biological 15 years ago? And he said, 1%. I said, what do you think the number will be in 10 years' time? And he said 30 to 35%. This is our kelp business here. We have a couple of brands. Zelp is for ag and hort, and Valere is for human consumption. This is giant kelp, it's the world's fastest growing plant. I've funded New Zealand's largest ever seaweed research project. It was a $380,000 project, of which you, the taxpayer, paid half. I paid the other half. I won a high court battle against the Ministry of Fisheries. I now own 40% of all the giant kelp quota in New Zealand. We live harvest, as you can see here, and we slow dry it. It's nutrient rich. There are 29 trace elements in this. It's the highest iodine content of any plant. It's a 3% iodine. 91% of all New Zealanders are iodine deficient. This is the most efficient way of getting iodine into your system. It's traceable and it's in the quota system. We feed it to our stock. When we feed, the only supplements we feed to our stock are salt, rock salt, and kelp. This is a barley trial that was done on Nigel Greenwood's place. On the left is the control, on the right was 10 kilograms to the hectare of Zelp. There was a 7% increase in nutrient density. That's a scientific test for nutrient density. That resulted in a 14% increase in yield. It was an extra $350 profit per hectare. And what's happening there is the connection between the plant, the roots, and the fungi in the soil biology. And they help one another and they build soil carbon. This is a trial that we did with a guy from down at Heriot, South Otago. On the right, he put kelp. On the left was the control. 2 kilograms to the hectare, 21% increase in yield. They ate all of the Swedes on the right-hand side. These animals are smarter than we think. On the left-hand side, there was a lot of dry rot. On the right-hand side, there was virtually no dry rot. This is wild lamb, untouched by man, hunted in the wild. I'm a certified hunter, and we take it to a certified processor. It's got a distinctive taste missing in most commercial breeds. Josh Barlow from the casino in Auckland, the Sugar Club, says it's the product of 2018. This is what it looks like when we're hunting them in the wild. That's Darren Wright's cooking of our wild lamb, Chillingworth Road. We also do wool, so we're pioneers of cozy wear. We're farming organically and ethically, no chemicals. Our wool is the stretchiest and lightest of all wool. We mix it with possum, and we're trying to start what we call the slow fibre movement. So they're the things that we make. Want to save a weka, eat a weka. We set up New Zealand's first large predator-proof reserve on Banks Peninsula. We've bred more weka in our reserves than anyone else in the country. These birds are 5 months old. The one in the centre and to the left are the male and female. The other ones, no, they're 5 weeks old, not 5 months old, 5 weeks old, those 4 chicks. No farmed species has ever died out. What we do is like George Soros here. We identify the false premise and head in the opposite direction as hard and as fast as we can go. The false premise is chemical farming is sustainable. It's a false premise. So, to finish, don't be ahead of the curve, create a new curve. See the world as it is, not as it ought to be. There are none so entrenched, Doug-Ed Meads, as those being left behind. Pursue trends, not trendy. We don't touch a business unless we can wrap 10 monopolies around it. Our time horizon is not 100 days, it's 100 years. We're going to break the world record for barley biologically with the group that we're dealing with now. The current world record holder put 700 kilos of urea per hectare to break that record. Staggering amount. Science is not a destination, it's a journey.